Hey everybody, welcome back to Endure, the Athlete Story. Today's guest is Hannah Shields. Hannah is an adventurer, a mountain climber and an ultra runner. Hannah was the first woman from Northern Ireland to summit Everest in 2007, and in this episode Hannah takes us through her experiences, her story of climbing Everest and attempting it the first time, and unfortunately having to turn back a few hundred metres from the summit. But how she was determined to come back in 2007 and successfully reach the summit, and the story she tells, the experiences she was through are just unbelievable. Hannah tells us how she had near-death experiences, how unfortunately she had to help bury the body of a dead climber, how she saved the life of a fellow climber, and just everything that comes with Everest. So it's a really interesting and inspiring episode, and I think that anyone that listens to it will just be inspired to go after their goals, to take on a challenge. And Hannah's positivity and energy just is infectious and just wants to make you go out and achieve things. So I really hope you get a lot of value from this episode. Hannah's also completed a ski race to the magnetic North Pole, has climbed mountains all over the world. She is also an ultra runner and has done Ironman and is a dentist by profession. So again, really hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did listening to Hannah and getting a chat with her. Again, this episode is brought to you by EJX2 Coaching. I'm a triathlon and endurance coach and provide lactate testing for anyone based in the northwest of Ireland. I would love to get a chat to you if you have an event coming up, or if you need some help in preparation or would like some coaching. Just drop me an email at ejx2coaching@hotmail.com, or drop us a message on Facebook or Instagram at EJX2 Coaching. So without further ado, Hannah Shields on today's show, and I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Hannah Shields, welcome to Endure, the Athlete Story. It's a pleasure to have you here. Really excited to get a chatty. How are you doing?
God bless you, Emma. You of all people should know that it can be a bit of a one-way conversation at times. Whenever I come at the other end and somebody says a dual chat, no, it could be a little bit one-sided here. So apologies if I just take with it and run with it.
That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear me anyway. So that's good. That's good. So where are you at? What are you at the minute, Hannah? Where are you at in your training, or what are we at today even?
Today it was a beautiful walk out of my beloved Benevena and then down onto the beach. I'm recovering very well. 2 years ago, actually coming up now on the 7th of May, I had quite a freak accident. Pretty drama, typical me. I cycled into a fallen power line that had gone over the road. I hit it in the face because it was at head height. I was on the bicycle. Got catapulted off, electrocuted off. So the hospital said, I can't really remember too much about it, but I just remembered whenever I came around that, sort of had a sore head. My heart was going all over the place. But typical, I was out on my new expensive bicycle, and all I could think of was, how's my bicycle? How's my bicycle? That was the first thing. That's all I could think about. How's my bike? Not about me, but yeah, it's been a tough couple of years, but I'm getting there. Compared to this time last year, I feel terrific, but still have quite a few issues. That's just going to take a bit of time to recover. And a lot of athletes know, it's really frustrating whenever you're injured, because you just want to get back there. You just want to get back being active and doing the things that you love doing. So my sort of parameters of what I've been capable of have changed dramatically. Like this time last year, it was, let's just walk.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of that's the stage I was at. And now I can walk, and I'll try doing a bit more jogging whenever I can. I've had quite a lot of injections into my head because unfortunately, whenever I landed smack on my head, and my helmet was smashed in a couple of places. So my head took the full brunt of it.
Mm-hmm.
So just endless headaches, endless headaches. So that's what's dictating my every single day for this past 2 years is managing headaches. But anyway,
Sure.
listen, I'm getting there. It's still tough, sort of like whenever I see people out on the bikes and whenever people see them running past me, I go, oh, soon,
Yeah.
someday,
Yeah.
soon.
So you
Yeah.
have the positivity, they look to the future that you will get back there, they doing what you love doing.
Yeah, and that's, and sort of, and I know that that's one of it's a good benefit for me, sort of that I am motivated, that I'm can, but it's hard work, sort of to stay motivated. And I know a lot of people think that I'm, oh, really happy all the time, but sort of whenever you get the bad headache days and you can't do anything because I had to keep up my job, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was tough going.
Yeah.
And like that was one of the times that I very much was proactive in seeking help with that. And I went to see a clinical psychologist because even though I know I had all the answers, what I needed to do, and like sort of, we all need, like if you're injured, you'll go to your physio, you'll go to your rehab, you'll
Yeah.
you'll do it all. And sometimes you forget about the head bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very much, once I knew that this was going to be a long-term thing, that I went and I just got the help just to keep steering me in the right direction.
Yeah.
And again, as an athlete, you will know this. Whenever you're that injured, you sometimes, if you're trying to start back, you keep comparing yourself to what you were before the injury.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to beat yourself up and go, oh God, before I was injured, I could do this, I could do
Mm-hmm.
that, this is crap. So it's all about just helping to change that mindset for me and just be grateful for all the small progresses that I can do.
Yeah. That's good. So like that was a freak accident, and it was quite a serious accident. So you were just cycling along, and it was an overhead power line, was it, that was
Yeah,
too low?
it had fallen
Jeepers.
over the road. And yeah, listen, it's just one of those. But then that's me, Jesus, drama queen Emma. God of Almighty. And like, I'm not going to fall off the chair and do any damage. No, if
Yeah.
it's an electrical wire, I will cycle into it. That's,
Well,
yes.
hopefully you're continuing your recovery and back to full fitness, and you get back doing what you love doing shortly. But can you take us back to how you get into that love of everything you do? So you're a mountain climber, an adventurer. You've done triathlon, ultra running. Where did that all start for you, Hannah?
I think, Emmett, it's like most things that started in childhood. Like sort of, we were very privileged whenever we were going up. Now I'm coming on 57, so we lived in the countryside. It was the roads were a much safer place. The whole country was a much safer place, even though it was in the midst of all the troubles.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember as kids, we used to go out, particularly in the summer, like after breakfast, you just went out and you spent the whole day outside roaming the countryside. And you only came back in whenever you wanted to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my mum actually had to have a little bell to ring at us every so often to try and get us in. Um, and so I was used to just always being active. And I particularly loved, out and exploring the place with all the fellas, because to me, they were doing much more exciting things than
Yeah.
I wasn't one for sitting inside playing with dolls and doing things like that. No, I just preferred to be outside. But because I was hanging out with the fellas, sort of, there was always that to prove that I was up to their standards. I had to run faster, climb higher trees, sort of do more daredevil things. And I suppose that's what always made me accept that, I always had to keep pushing myself and realizing that I could push myself,
Yeah.
beyond what I was capable of.
Yeah. I think that kind of conversation has come up a few times in this show of like we're talking to some other people, I can't remember who it was, but like having siblings or even like professional athletes that are siblings, they're always been pushed. So like in your case, you were trying to keep up with the boys, and which made you go outside your comfort zone and probably surpass them in many things. So, and again, as you say, as a child, always outdoors, active and playing, you were really building fitness and endurance at a young age, but through play, which I think is very important for kids nowadays. Even go to their clubs and stuff, which is great, but they can be playing and getting that sort of building that engine for an endurance athlete or for just fitness as a person as well, just through
And
play.
I think it's very important for sort of all the parents out there to encourage the children, even just to do like I see sort of in the Gaelic and all the different games where they're trying to improve their hand to eye coordination of just throwing balls, just
Mm-hmm.
doing things like that, being outside, kicking a football, throwing a ball around. It just encourages you to sort of get that mentality of sport, but also to engage all the senses so that they are all stimulated. I think that that's very important.
Yeah,
And I love seeing the next sort of, because that's what we did as kids. We were just either kicking a ball, throwing a ball, or running away from each other or
yeah,
chasing somebody. That's just what we did. So it was always out there. We didn't even think about it. It was just part of life. And I went then to a boarding school up in Portstewart. Um, and I played hockey. And I remember I suppose my basic mountaineering skills came in very early on in life because I kept climbing over the walls to escape, to run down to the bar mouth. And I honestly, whenever I think about climbing, shimmying down drain pipes and climbing over walls, just to run down to the beach and to get and to me that's what I did.
yeah.
And it never got caught. I'm actually very surprised that never got caught any of the time.
Very good. And did you develop onto a certain sport that you particularly enjoyed? What age would that have been at boarding school?
Oh, 11 to 18.
Mm.
And I was and I will always say this, I wasn't the most gifted, but I worked really hard at them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in hockey mainly at that stage, athletics, squash, tennis, badminton. Um, that was just because I loved sport. I loved any sport,
Mm-hmm.
and my teacher knew that. And I worked hard at them, and I was good enough that I was in all those teams. And then when I went to university in Manchester, I continued on with the hockey, and I played first team university hockey for the 4.5 years that I was there. So that was wonderful, that I could maintain that. And I loved playing with the team. Particularly at that stage, because it was a way for me to meet new people outside dentistry and medicine. And again, I loved that sport. And I remember, I used to see these people coming down off the trains from the Peak District, because it was Manchester that I went to in the Lake
Mm-hmm.
District. And they all had these big long socks, hiking boots, and short trousers. And I thought they looked like Egypts, but they were all the walkers.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one Sunday or one Saturday, for some strange reason, the university hockey match was cancelled. And one of the girls in the hall said, "Do you fancy coming out for a walk on the hills?" And I went, "Well, let's get out of Manchester." So we headed up to the Peak District. There was a gang of us. They all had the walking boots, all the bits and pieces. I just had my trainers on, an old cagoule that I had. It was pissing out of the heavens. And I remember we spent 3 hours walking in the Peak District. And I just knew then, oh, this is what I loved. I was so exhilarated at the end of it. I came back and I remember starting to save a bit of money from my first pair of walking boots, and then having to save a bit more money to get my waterproof jacket, and then just deliberately walking into every single puddle that I could walk into because I knew I could keep my feet dry. It and I think that that's certainly where the love of the outdoor, the walking, came in. And it was very handy after I qualified. Instead of going into dentistry, I started to be training for a maxillofacial surgeon. So I was working in different hospitals all over England. Couldn't commit to team sport.
Yeah.
So I still continued with the walking and things like that, but then I took up rowing because I
Ah,
worked up in New York and I loved the rowing as well. I loved the discipline of it, the technique of it, that, you had to get the basics right um, to be good at it.
yeah,
Um, so I was always open to trying new sports, sort of to fit into what I was doing in my career,
yeah,
because the career kind of came first at that stage.
yeah. So you were studying dentistry, or you started working as a dentist, did you, or first, or you went in the?
No, what actually happened is I qualified, yes, as a dentist, and then there was a surgeon that I really admired whenever I was a student, and just as I was about to qualify, he sort of turned around to me and he says, "Oh, I think you would make a great, well, just facial surgeon." And I hadn't even thought about that. And
Mm,
again, this was somebody that I admired. This was somebody that had authority, and he saw something in me that I just didn't see in myself. So because he said that to me, I went, well, why not? And I know it could have been very easy to keep going down the path that I thought I was going to go. But I went, well, let's try this. What's the worst thing that can happen? Don't like it. And I have to admit, in my very first couple of weeks, I knew that I was hooked. So you have to be, then you work as a number of years and working your way up the ladder in the special surgery, and then you have to go back and study medicine because you have to be doubly qualified.
mm-hmm.
And then I got very ill. I was in third year medicine, and got multiple organ failure. And that was,
Oh,
again, the first time, I suppose, in my life that huge setback. I had to, I literally was in hospital in London, and then I got transferred back over to Ireland, and I was in and out of hospital for 6 months. Tough time. That was
mm,
the very first time. Um, and again, I suppose I was, 27, 28. And the one thing I will say about that, sort of, I was used to being a tough person, get on with it. And I was brought up in that mentality that you don't complain, you just get on with it. And speaking about mental health, it was all talked about in hushed tones.
mm,
Coming here from Derry, that, I always remember my parents talking about Grantia, sort of, or
yeah,
people that were into Grantia, and it was said in very hushed tones, as if you don't talk about it, and it was something to be ashamed of.
mm-hmm.
So because I knew I was a strong person, I kept saying, I can cope with this. And everybody, how are you? And I always had this fixed grin on my face going, I'm fine. And inside, I was falling to pieces, but I just did not want anybody to see that. And I'm very open about this now, that I remember there was one time I was at home, discharged myself from hospital, and I went to the bathroom, and my younger brother had to come with me, clean me. And I remember going to bed that night going, if this is what my life's going to be, I don't want to live this anymore. And that was a huge shock for me, because up until then, I'd been going, nothing the matter with me, nothing the matter with me. And I was self aware enough that to even think that, I went, okay, you're not coping with this. And I realized I had to be true to myself and
Mm-hmm.
honest with myself, and then honest to everybody else. I remember coming down the next morning, breaking down, crying to my parents, going, I'm not coping with this. And it was the best thing that I ever did, because that weight that I'd been burdening, sort of pretending to myself that I was fine, sort of, for on and off for up until that point, probably about 5 months,
Mm,
to admit I was struggling. And then to get the reassurance and be able to talk openly about it, it was fantastic. And
yeah,
that was the time after that I really realized that I had to spend as much time looking after my mental health as my physical health. And
yeah,
so it was something that I was very acutely aware of from then on in.
mm,
No, I'm still not good at asking for help. I'm
yeah,
not standing myself up to be any model there, because I'm still very much, yeah, I can do with this, I can do this. But I've now learned that there's a point whenever I have to go, okay, enough is enough. You need to talk to somebody. And I've got a couple of really good friends
mm,
that I know I can pick up the phone to them. talk to them. They let me ramble. They let me cry. There's no judgment. They let me get it out of my system, and then I'm out with the world again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very lucky that I can see that in myself, and whenever I need to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for opening up and sharing that, Hannah, because I'm sure it'll help a lot of people who listen, because they see you as that tough person. You've climbed Everest, you've done multiple challenges, Ironman, and there you are telling that story of how you just needed help and you had to open up. And I'm sure that'll help a lot of people. And we were chatting with Dan Quigley in a recent episode, who's doing 10 Ironman in 10 days for suicide awareness in memory of his father Colin, and he was saying the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. It's just open up, just talk to somebody, anybody, a professional, a friend, a parent, a family member, but just open up, and as you say, that weight is lifted, and makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, what is the old cliche that they used to say? A problem shared is a problem halved.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really important. But we're still, I think, sort of in Northern Ireland, we still have that thing that, now, don't get me wrong, I'm not out there, blubbering and crying and, sort of sharing my innermost feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me.
Mm-hmm.
But, sort of, I still think that we're very protective of that, because it's still talked about in hushed stuff. You only have to look at the suicide rate
Yeah.
in Northern Ireland in particular with young men. As I say, I know I'm a tough cookie, believe me, and I am a tough cookie, but I know that mentally we have to accept that we need help in it.
Mm-hmm.
So have the things there, sort of, and that's why what sort of come, yeah, that was, yeah. I've known a couple of friends that have committed suicide, and there's always that. Could have done anything differently, but that's why I think it's very important to approach this and see that somebody who is sort of semi-successful in a lot of
Yeah.
things that I've done, that sort of, I don't see it as a failure,
Yeah.
sort of, and a weakness.
Yeah.
Being able to talk about it, I see it actually as a strength now, because
Mm-hmm.
this is how I have got through
Yeah.
a lot of very challenging times.
Yeah, because if you look at it in the sense of physically, if you're sick or you're injured as an athlete, you're going to sit in the sofa and rest for a few days. And the same goes for your mental state. If it's not right, you need the recovery, which could be talking to someone, chilling out from whatever is causing the mental
Yep, the
stress
anguish.
there or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's a very important message, I think, that it isn't a weakness, it's a strength, and you moved on from that. And obviously, with what you went on to do, it I'm sure it stood you. So can you tell us at what point, so you recovered from the illness, did you?
I
The
I was recovering, believe it or not, and I gave up, sort of my medical training, and I came back to Northern Ireland because I had to work, I had to earn money. I came back into dentistry,
mm-hmm.
and then I'd heard that there was an Irish expedition going out to Mount Everest in '93, and this was '92. I heard about that, end of '91, '92, and I remember going down. Now, I had tried illegally to get into Tibet, and got arrested by the Chinese army twice. Sort of, that's the kind of things I did. Sort of, so I thought I just wanted to get into Tibet legally. And I went out with the first Irish expedition, and I am not joking. Whenever I saw Mount Everest, and you'll always hear her referring to it as a she, because she is called Chomolungma,
Mm-hmm.
which is goddess, mother of the earth. So I saw her from her full entirety in the north side, the Tibetan side. And I know I always say this, but it was true. My stomach did the biggest Irish jig you can imagine. And my insides were in knots, because I remember looking at this mountain going, oh shit, that's what I'm going to do. And I just knew in my gut that's what I wanted to do. And it scared the bejesus out of me,
Yeah.
because I'd just come out of being sick. Sort of, I wasn't a walker, sort of, I was scared of heights. That was another big thing, sort of. And also, I'd had, you know, kind of long-term like sort of problems with my lungs in particular. So my asthma was not good at that stage. And I just kept laughing to myself going, you're what? You're thinking of doing this? And I went, absolutely. And I was out with the best climbers that had got together, Dawson Stelfox, Frank Nugent, there was Dermot Summers, amazing group of gentlemen. And I just remember saying to them, what do I have to do to climb this mountain? And they did laugh at me a little bit to begin with. And I went, no, I'm going to do this. So they gave me a list, and I'm a big one for writing lists. I came back to, I was working in Oma at the time, and I knew I had to make changes. Again, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to make these changes. How do I get into climbing? And then a friend of mine who was a consultant in Sheffield Dental Hospital, you talk about how the way the universe comes around. He rang me a couple of weeks later after I'd come back and said, Hannah, I've got a job going for you over here. Would you be interested? And I went, oh God, it was meant to be. So I handed my notice in, went off to Sheffield, which was the mecca for climbing. And just literally, I'm a big one that you need to get the basics right. So I went to every course that I could conceivably go on. And I kept climbing with people. Always, I climbed with people who were better than me, because I knew I needed to be constantly pushed. And they were great because they allowed me to make mistakes. And I learned from those mistakes, because whenever I was a surgeon, my very first consultant, he was brilliant. He turned around to me and he says, and it's something, again, I've always held to, he said, Hannah, we're only human. We will make mistakes. But what I want from you is to be honest about them, to learn from them, and to not do them again. Because whenever you're cutting up people, you don't want to be making too many mistakes. And that was brilliant, because then it was very easy for me to marry that into my climbing, because again, you don't want to make mistakes whenever you're climbing. It sounds terribly dramatic, but people die if you make mistakes. So all these lads, I was always climbing with fellas, they just constantly pushed me. They didn't push me too much that it absolutely scared me beyond being able to physically or mentally cope with that. Because again, it's that same whenever you're racing, that sometimes if you're going too fast in the bike, coming around a corner, you go, God, if I hit this right, this will be fantastic. But if I just hit it slightly wrong, and you don't want to think about it, because you know, if you start to think about it mentally, then you'll seize up, and that's whenever you make mistakes. It's that same kind of thing, you know, like sort of just try and keep yourself fluid, keep pushing forward, and just keep climbing up. But I still had an issue with heights. And I remember whenever I was learning to ice climb, you know, like sort of, it was scary having your ice axe and knowing that the only thing is keeping you up on this ice wall is your ice axe and your crampons being about 1 millimeter into the ice. And you could sometimes look between your legs and there was a couple of thousand, you know, feet of nothingness. And you go, I always knew whenever I was thinking too much, because my left leg would start to shake. And, you know, like, sort of, it was always refocus, come on, refocus, keep climbing upwards, keep climbing, because basically that's the only way you could go.
And so, just to rewind a bit, Hannah, when you went out in 1993, that was just to see Everest. It wasn't the attempt to climb it or anything. That was just.
Yep. That was just to climb. That was just to go out as a trekker.
Okay.
You know, like, sort of to support the mountaineers. And then I literally, whenever I knew that I wanted to do it, I didn't give myself a time scale on this, because I knew I needed to get a lot of skills. And that's why I just kept, first of all, my basic climbing skills, then pushing it on to ice work, and then going to the high mountains, the Alps, and then going to South America to climb more extreme, more isolated, and just always pushing myself up the steps every single time. Because just to improve, and also for me, I wanted to feel comfortable that I could look after myself. There's a lot of people, and I, first of all, I would not berate anybody for having dreams. because I always loved them, like sort of loved the mountains, and particularly then at that stage, and like I knew it was a dream of mine to climb, but I wanted to make sure that I had the full, like sort of weight of experience behind me before I went to tackle it.
Yeah.
So that's why it was in then 1990, no, 2002, I was climbing in South America and met this gentleman, Pat Falvey, and Pat we were climbing and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I would like to summit Mount Everest, or at least climb it, attempt it. And he says, right, okay, if I get an expedition up, would you be interested? And I went, absolutely. And I thought it was going to be a couple of years down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And he rang up the following year saying, we've got a climbing permit for 2003. It was the 50th anniversary of Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norg's first summit.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were given a little bit more climbing permits that year. And I remember whenever he rang me up and said, are you in or you out? And I said, how much is this going to cost me? And he said, at least £35,000. And I had an asthma attack at the end of the phone. I'm not joking. Because Emmett, if you've got £35,000 in your bank account, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I certainly don't.
And I sort of went, what? And probably a lot of people are thinking, what?
Yeah.
But your climbing permit at that stage was $10,000. Like a couple of jackets, £500 a pop. My climbing boots, they were £700 or £800. A onesie suit, £1,500. Tents, £500 a pop. Can you see then how the costs all start to escalate? And so for the next year, all I could think of was trying to get that money together. And so I got a few people on board to help me fundraise. I remortgaged my house. Oh God, anything that wasn't pinned down, I sold it. And that was great, because I was going to Mount Everest, but for that whole year, my mind was taken away from what I was really going out to do, because all I could think of was raising money rather than get myself mentally focused to go and climb this mountain. And whenever I flew into Nepal and went into the famous Lukla, which is in the south side, I remember getting out of this tiny little plane in the foothills of the Himalayas. I could hardly breathe. And I'm not joking. I was sort of going, oh my God, how the heck am I going to climb the big mountains when I can't even breathe here? And there was 272 climbing permits given, and there were between 12 and 17 permits for ladies. And we were climbing. I remember Claire and I going towards base camp, big, strong lads around us. And we were completely intimidated by this because I was struggling to breathe. As you go in now, again, I know I never sell this very well, but as you're going higher, in particularly the Himalayas, it's very dry. So you get what's known as the Khumbu cough. You just feel this dry, hacking cough that you feel your guts are coming out of you at times. You lose your appetite. You're getting headaches all the time. You feel nauseous. And that's even just as you're getting into base camp. Mount Everest, she's a beautiful mountain. She's not technical by any stretch of the imagination. But I know you, Emmett, you're as fit as a flea. If I put you in the summit of Everest now, you and me both would be both dead in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No questions asked. And that's because of the lack of oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be out there for minimum of a month for your body to start adapting, and you start producing more hemoglobin so you can make use of what little oxygen there is. So that's one of the big problems. The other big problem is the altitude. As here we're at sea level, pressure outside equal to pressure inside. As you start to go up the mountain, is the reverse of scuba diving. The pressure is less outside.
Yeah.
So what actually happens, our body becomes under pressure. So the fluids want to get pushed out. So the only natural spaces that we have in our bodies where they can go to is our lungs and our inner brain. So that's the big killers. You get pulmonary edema, where you literally drown in your own lungs. And then the other is cerebral edema, where pressure builds up. And I'm not joking, Emmett, And I don't make any apologies. It is as traumatic as that.
Yeah.
You make one simple little mistake, and you die.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, as you said, that was one of my questions. Like how you mentioned that it's not the most technical of climbs or the most technical of mountains, but it's all those things. And I was just preparing for chatting to you. I watched the movie Everest, which you can tell me, I thought it was a great movie, but you can tell me, was it realistic? What it was? It showed you the whole process of trekking up the base camp and all, but what did you
They
think?
moved too fast. They actually moved too fast. Now, I've got a picture of me on the summit ridge, and this was after I came down, and it's about 1 kilometer.
Mm,
Now, I know, sort of whenever I was just before I had this accident, sort of, I was running my kilometers in about 3.5 minutes.
mm-hmm.
We were the fastest moving team on that ridge. The fastest moving team. That kilometer took us 7 hours to do. 7 hours. With every step that I took, and now this is with oxygen as well. I remember taking literally the deepest breaths like that, between 15 to 20 deep breaths. Then I would take another step. And again, we all know as athletes, whenever you're at that age, you are pushing your body to the extreme. Your muscles are crying out for oxygen because the lactic acid builds up. Whenever you're up there, your body is just screaming at you, I need oxygen. And there's no oxygen that you can take. And we were the fastest moving team. And that's the only
Incredible.
thing, because I watched that. I was involved with I was involved in that Everest thing. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
only thing I said to them. I went, you're moving too fast.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
moving far too fast.
Yeah. But now it was just a good Hollywood version, I would say, of just an idea of it. But just when you're talking about like the oxygen there, I'm sure I was reading a book. It's an interesting book called The Mind and the Curiously Elastic Limits of Human Performance, quite a long title. But they
Right.
mentioned in it, you might be familiar with him, Reinhold
Reinhold
Messner.
Mendelssohn. Yeah.
So like he was the first, if I'm right, person to summit Everest without supplement oxygen,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you can imagine is just crazy.
Yeah, like I mean, but then there's some people that are just physiologically can
Mm-hmm.
adapt quicker to it. Like one of my mountaineering buddies, he is the most phenomenal climate. He's a European mountain guide.
Mm-hmm.
Once he get and as fit as flea, honestly, the fittest fella that I know. Anytime he goes over 18,000 feet, he's just in a heap.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
just There's some people that just physiologically their bodies cannot cope with it. And the Sherpas are people that are indigenous to that particular area. It's like County Derry people, County Tyrone people, sort
Mm-hmm.
of, we're all indicative to our little counties. The Sherpa people are born and bred in that particular region of the Himalaya.
Mm-hmm.
So they're physiologically adapted to that
Yeah.
lack of oxygen, but they still, like human beings, are not meant to be up in
Yeah.
these places,
Yeah.
even if you are born there. But yeah, sort of, it's a tough place to go. And as a mountaineer, you certainly, whenever we were climbing, there was absolutely no rescue whenever you went up into these high mountains, because helicopters could not fly that height.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a few, sort of rescues now that they can do from Camp One,
Yeah.
because that all happened after the avalanche a couple of years ago. They just had to, the earthquake, I should say, sorry, and they had to do a lot of rescues.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever we were doing it, there's absolutely no. If you're walking wounded, you can be
Yeah.
helped down. And I remember there was in the ice fall, the Cumbre ice fall, we were there in the middle of a big avalanche that was just, yeah, we thought our time had come. There was a couple of killed and there was a couple of walking wounded, and it took 30 people to go up and bring those two people down.
Mm.
If you can't move, you can't be brought down.
Yeah.
It's as
It's,
simple as that.
I think
Yeah.
that's what's so, I don't even have the word for it, but so I don't want to use crazy because it's not the right word, but it's so scary that death is so possible. like when you're taking, like people undertake big challenges, big ultra endurance things, but if they're running or cycling, worst comes to it, they can stop and get in the car or get back in the hotel or whatever. You're up there. If you don't want to do it, you can't say no, I'm not doing it. You still have to come down. You still have to face all the altitude, the lack of oxygen. That's what's so crazy about it for me, I think.
But then again, it's like anything, Emma, you know, sort of, I would never, I'm very much people have your dreams, but you train for those dreams.
Yeah.
Like this had taken me years to build up to this.
Mm-hmm.
And even that first time, you know, I realized I had a lot to learn about high altitude
Yeah.
mountaineering. Again, that was just another step beyond what I had done. And, you know, sort of, I remember, you know, sort of, we were going up. We were about 2 months into this whenever we made a summit bid, and there was again our lead Sadar. He had summited 6 times. We were climbing through a storm. I remember it literally got blown off my feet. Literally got blown off my feet. The only thing that kept me, I was still clipped into the lead rope, and there was Pat in front of me, the Sadar, and then all the rest of the teams were behind me. You climb at night time because it's colder and the ice is much more secure.
Mm-hmm.
So you tend to climb at about 11, 10 o'clock at night and finish as the sun is coming up in the morning. And so that's why we were climbing through the night. And I remember seeing this torch coming towards me and I went, oh, what's happening? And he just patted me on the shoulder and he said, we're going down nobody summits today. We went back down to 26,000 feet, which is the death zone. Now, we had only got enough oxygen for one summit bid, because again, you have to carry the oxygen up in it with
Yeah.
you. And they were also a couple of $100 a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it was all costs and things like that. So I remember there was Pat, Mick, Joe, and myself. We were at base camp. Oxygen sats, a lot of people know about it. You will know about this, that like here, sea level, you would want it to be about 98, 99%.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking my oxygen sats that next day and I was running at 47%. And I was deliriously happy. I was so hypoxic. But the problem, whenever we started our summit bid the next night, I was going in hypothermic mode. My body was trying to protect itself. So the last thing it wanted to do was put the blood out to the extremities of the oxygen. So I actually started off cold. And again, a couple of hours into it, I knew I had frostbitten feet. I didn't care if I was losing my toes because I had what's known as summit fever. I thought this is my only one and only chance at this. I'm going for it. About 7 hours into it, I couldn't feel up my hands up to my elbows, couldn't feel a thing. And I remember knowing that I was going to possibly lose my fingers, and I did not care. And I thought I was being very logical. I thought, oh, okay, I'll not be able to do dentistry, but I'll retrain to be a pharmacist because I don't need my fingers for that. And that's all I could think of. You're going on, you're going on. And then I remember it was probably about 100 vertical meters from the summit. I tried to make a couple of moves. I couldn't feel a thing and I just kept falling back. And it was whenever I was about to make the third move and I fell back again, that I knew. I went, okay, you're going to kill yourself here. And I went, right, okay, that's my choice. And then there was a moment of clarity came in and I knew Jer, my buddy behind me, and Mick, and I just knew them. I knew them, and I knew that they would have sacrificed their lives and they would have put their lives at risk to save me. And that's whenever I just turned around and said, no, 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 no. You turn around and you come back to fight again.
Mm-hmm.
But I was devastated. And I remember coming down and we know where all the bodies are. You don't move them. That's their grave. You try and bury them if possible, but they're frozen into the sides of the mountain. And I remember there was a fresh body and I saw people climbing over this person. And again, a lot of people really, that's why I'm saying you can't judge it, that these people are trying desperately to stay alive themselves. That I don't know why to this day, I remember putting my hand down and touching him and he moaned. And And I just went, oh, shit, he's alive. And I thought, what the heck can I do? You know, like I had frostbitten feet, frostbitten hands. I'd actually had a really, really bad asthma attack, and I'd actually cracked 3 ribs. I felt them pop. And I sat beside him, and now, luckily enough, I had some medication. He was a Sherpa that was left by his team, and I can understand why they left him, and I can understand why the people climbed over him. Um, but I had medication. I gave him an injection. He was also snowblind. I gave him some painkillers. And then I started to get colder and colder because I didn't want to leave him while he was still alive. But then, and I know I always say this, that desire to actually live, that it was just so strong within me. And I got really angry with him because I sort of, in my own head, I was going, geez, I don't want to leave you, but at the same time, I want to live, and you're the reason why I'm here. And I got up, and again, Emma, don't get in the wrong side of me. I remember just kicking him and thumping him and kicking him and thumping him. And now whether it was a medication or whether it was the mere fact that I was kicking him and thumping him, managed to stir him, his consciousness, and he was able to stand up. Now he was snowblind, he couldn't see a thing. So I short roped him, and I took him down the mountain to a place where the other Sherpas could come and rescue him, because I was in pieces at this stage as
Mm-hmm.
well. Yeah, so whenever I came back, I was bitterly disappointed. I was a high achiever. I was used to putting the work in and being successful. And I felt I'd let myself down. I felt I'd let other people down that invested in me. And then I kind of got clarity, and I went, okay, you were there to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking at the positives. I went, you saved somebody's life. You learned a hell of a lot. And I applauded the things that went well. I made a list of those. Then I made a list of the things that didn't go so well. And I went, right, I need to start doing a bit more work here.
Mm-hmm.
And if I hadn't thought that I could have achieved the summit, I really honestly would not have thought about going back, but I knew I could. So that's what was driving me on. I knew it was there, and I knew that I had the ability, but I just needed to do a hell of a lot more work on it. So,
Yeah.
and I was prepared to do that.
And that story about saving the Sherpa on your way back down, that is just incredible. I'm just,
Oh,
it's like a
it's
movie playing out in my head, but but do you,
listen, it was just circumstances, and I really do believe now that that's the reason why I was there that
yeah,
first time.
that's what I was going to say.
That
Surely
I
that
just
life
happened to be,
saved
yeah.
is definitely outweighs the disappointment of not getting to the summit that first time.
Yep.
And Hannah, do you still have you had any contact with that man since, or?
No, but it was wonderful, because the Sherpas, they all just from then on in, you know, sort of, they always kept saying to me, "Oh, you're our sister," you know, sort of, and they came to my aid whenever I went and I made the summit in 2007.
Yeah.
They were there for me that time whenever I needed them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big one, karma, you know, sort of, it comes, what goes around comes around. And whenever I needed their help, they were there for me, even though it wasn't, they recognized me. I remember going
Yeah.
in, oh, there was a lot happening in between then, but anyway, I ended up going to North Pole, and oh, yeah, anyway, but they were there for me whenever I needed them. So yeah.
Yeah. While we're on Everest, so you went back then, and then maybe if we have time, you can tell us about the North Pole, because that's another amazing story. But you went back, so 2003. Just to summarize here, you attempted the summit Everest and made it very close to the top, but had to turn.
Yeah,
And so then 2007, you went back,
ended
and
up,
this time
went out.
more prepared, worked on what you had to work on.
Absolutely. And I am not joking, now I had the chance to go out in 2004 for a fully funded expedition. And oh God, you talk about how tempting that was. But I remember looking at my list of all the things that I knew that I needed to do. And I'd only ticked off a couple of them at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I said no to a fully funded expedition, because I knew in my own head that whenever I was going to go back again, I was going to go back mentally knowing that I was as prepared as I possibly could be.
Yeah.
I did not want to go out with any doubts, because if you go out in a place like that and you have any doubts, you will not perform to your full ability.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way that I've actually always tried to approach everything. Do it as prepared as I possibly can be,
Yeah.
particularly for the mountaineering. So I had heard that there was a Russian expedition going out. I sent my CV off to them. I got accepted onto the expedition. I flew into Kathmandu airport, met up with the team. There was 10 lads, and I was kind of hello, hello, hello to all of them, and they just looked at me blankly, and I went, Jesus, they didn't speak a word of English except for the team leader. And yeah, that was an experience in itself.
Yeah.
But they were amazing, hardcore mountaineers. They were known as snow leopards, so they were very good technical climbers from Russia.
Yeah.
But again, they just had that Russian mentality. They smoked and drank vodka, and that is no exaggeration. The whole way up that blooming mountain and the whole way back down again, they were hard ass. And they used to laugh at me, like sort of because like they would always try to take photos of me, and I would go, they would go, Hannah, photo, and I would go, no photo. Why? And I went, no lipstick, and they would look at me to begin with and go, ah. Because everywhere I go, there's 5 things I bring with me in all my expeditions. 1 roll of toilet paper that lasts you your 2 to 3 months. Emma's going, okay. Lipstick, perfume, because even though I'm out with all the men, that's little my homage to being a female. My packet of potato, cheese and onion crisps has to be the northern ones. None of the southern ones. Has to be the northern yellow packet, and a little bottle of Bushmills whiskey. So they used to always laugh at me, and they would kind of go, no, no lipstick, no photo. And they were the worst timekeepers in the world. And now, if you're starting off at 10 o'clock at night and it's minus 35 outside, you want to start at 10 o'clock and start climbing.
Yeah.
They were the biggest time wasters, and I gave them about a week to begin with. And then whenever they were still kept being late, some of my City of Derry Spartans will appreciate this. I kept shouting at them, would you lot shift your arses now? And they really didn't need to know what I was saying, but they knew by the tone of me.
It worked.
And I got them, they were very good timekeepers by the time we finished the expedition.
Can I just ask, kind of on that note of, if someone like yourself, you're planning to go to Everest, how is there a vetting process of who's allowed to climb on it? How come you ended up with the Russians, or how did you know that they were going to be, how could you trust them if they weren't part of your core team?
I trusted the recommendation of Noel Hannah.
Okay.
Noel, that is attempted Unix sort of K2 and all the rest, and some did K2, but was just attempting it there. Unix sort of Noel was a climb that I trusted with my life, and I trusted his recommendation. He had said to me that they were a good, solid crew, and that's why I trusted them.
Okay.
And it is amazing, how trust can be built up. And I saw it by the actions, that they weren't frivolous. Okay, I know they smoked and they drank vodka the whole way up, but whenever it came to the actual doing of the climbing, they were straight down the middle, which is what I was like. No arsing around, get on with it. They were where I needed to be there whenever I wanted them to be there, and vice versa. So it's amazing how you can build up trust like that. And also I trusted my own ability. I knew that, God forgive me, if anything ever happened to any of them, I could look after myself. And that was very important to me as well, because how could I communicate with them? Sort of, because I didn't have their language. I knew I needed to be self-sufficient. And right from the very beginning, I got into that mentality, is you only do what you know within what you can get yourself out of.
Yeah. So you were very confident at the second attempt. Can you just tell us then, on that second attempt, how that went and your story to the summit?
It was, again, there was a lot of, there's a weather window that you climb, to, you know, sort of go in about May, and that's before the monsoons come in, and that's whenever the weather's a wee bit settled. So what actually happens is people, you know, sort of now it's better, they get a better range of weather forecasts when it was improving. And whenever you see a lot of people going up the mountain, you really do not want to get caught up in that.
Yeah.
Because particularly in the north side, there is a huge section that you literally can only climb. It's coming up to the 3 steps. You can't even get your 2 feet beside each other on this side of the mountain. And you do not want to get caught on either end, because it could take you about half an hour to cross this. And this is where you can get stuck if there's too many people coming and going. You can only do one at a time. So there was a weather window. We saw lots of people going up the mountain, and we decided to wait it out. We were taking a gamble because we thought we don't want to get caught up in that. We knew there was a storm coming in. We trusted ourselves that we were good enough climbers to go through this. I remember going up to my high camp, and there was a body on the guy ropes in my tent. Again, I gave him my medication, my dexamethasone, but he was dead. And I remember burying him, taking kit out, you know, like anything that was in, and I saw a photograph of a woman, 2 children, and I assumed that that was his family. And I remember just putting everything else in the rucksack, setting it down with some sherpas that were heading down the mountain. And that night, whenever I was coming out to climb, unfortunately, the snow had blown off his boots. And I just remember looking at him going, I'll come back a 3rd time if I have to. You know, like, I don't want that to happen to me. And we started climbing again. And we were, because I was much smaller than a lot of the big tall lads, there was a movement around a big buttress of rock. I had to unclip myself because I just couldn't make the move if I was tied in. And I'm not joking, I fell. And to this day, I still don't know, because this was at 1:00 in the morning. There was a storm racing past us. You have an oxygen mask on you. You have got a rucksack filled with oxygen cylinders. You're in a onesie suit. You can't see anything except this wee head torch. And I just remember grabbing at old tats of rope as I was falling, and they held me. And I still remember my feet were dangling with my crampons on, and I couldn't find a leverage. I couldn't find anything to get my feet a hold of. And then all of a sudden, I just stopped panicking. I went, come on, take it very quickly, calm down. I got 1 foot in, and I got another foot in, and I was just then standing a bit more secure. And to this day, I still do not know, because I'm not physically as strong. My legs are like Jesus tree trunks. I can do anything to them, but upper body, I had no upper body strength. And I still remember pulling myself up. Now, it was only probably about 3 foot, but 3 foot for me, pulling up with all of this weight on your back, and clipping myself in. And I remember yelling out because there was one Russian in front of me and there was a Russian behind me, but I couldn't see them. They were again. And I remember crying and shouting into my oxygen mask, and it was like nobody could hear you. And I just had a little sob, and I went, because it really shook me. And then I gathered myself very quickly, and I went, okay, you either go back now or you go on with it. And that's it. That's your 2 options. And I just went, get on with it. And then, but during that fall, one of the little nozzles of my oxygen mask had obviously come away, and I was just hemorrhaging oxygen. So I remember reaching the summit, and it was glorious, but my contact lens had frozen to my eye for about an hour and a half before the summit. I was struggling to breathe because I was losing so much oxygen. I'd already gone through an oxygen cylinder, and I knew that I'd only half of one left, and that wasn't enough to get me back down to where it dumped more oxygen. So I kind of touched the summit. I'd left the picture, I'm not going to lie, I left the picture there from the gentleman that who had died. And I only that there was a Sherpa there, and he kept insisting. He was going, Hannah, photo. And I was going, oh, okay, right. And I'm glad that he made me doing it, but it was relief. There was relief. And it was spectacular at one stage, because I remember as the sun started to come up, you literally could see the curvature of the earth. And it was very precious.
Yeah.
But I was acutely aware. I started to cough up a bit of blood. So I knew it pulmonary edema. And I know that more people actually die coming off the mountain than going up, because they get into that summit fever mentality that I had the first time, that they just put everything to achieving the summit, and they forget that you have to come back down again. And normally, whenever you come back down off the summit, there's 1, 2, 3 stops that you make, 3 to 4 stops, overnighters, before you come back down to advanced base camp, where you potentially can be rescued. At that stage, I knew that I was in deep trouble and that I needed to keep walking, because, again, I knew that if I couldn't walk, that would be me left. And that, again, Emma, that desire to live was, I'm still amazed what the human body that can be, that what you can put your human body through, because that's all I could think of was, I want to live. And I just kept climbing down and down. And then word got back to advanced base camp that I was in a lot of trouble. And there's the North Col. It's quite a steep, sort of face of the mountain. At the top of that, I knew that there was an American there that had dexamethasone, which is what we use for pulmonary edema. And I remember, sort of shouting out his name at 3:00 in the morning. And this is after me going for nearly this was coming up to the 3rd day of just going non-stop. And I just shouted his name, and he went, come over here. And I said, I need your dex. And I still remember him just jamming it through. And I kind of looked at him and went, ow. That's all I remember. I was going, that's sore. Feeling just a wee bit sorry for myself. And then I just kept climbing down, and about halfway down, there was about 7 Sherpas were coming up to meet me, and they brought me down to the face, and there was another 7 of them down there at 8. There was 15 of them all together, came out to look after me, and they were there, whenever I needed them. So yeah, it was tough. And I remember coming back down to advanced base camp and looking for the medication, because I knew what I needed. But of course, whenever I went into the first aid kit looking for all of this stuff for pulmonary edema and all the rest, every bloody thing was written in Russian. I was going, oh, sweet holy mother of God. So the only thing I knew I could do was I hooked myself up to the oxygen, and I just sat in oxygen for about 12 hours and just breathed my way through oxygen until the next Russian were able to come down and tell me what I needed to inject myself with. So yeah,
unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And then when you get so you're saying advanced base camp, then is that different than base camp in general? So when you get to base camp, are you finished?
Yes, you can be driven out in the south side. You can be driven out in a big truck. Oh, sorry, in the north side, you can be driven out in a big truck. Whereas in the south side, whenever you come to base camp, you actually have to walk off the mountain. And the laugh was in 2003, because I had the frostbitten feet, the frostbitten hands, 3 cracked ribs, they knew that I couldn't make it down out of base camp. So they ordered a helicopter rescue for me. And I still remember this, that the whole team had sort of, all the tents were down, everything had already left. This helicopter came in. The rest of the team literally jumped on the helicopter. And as I was coming up, there was only Jer and myself. As I was about to climb onto the helicopter with my cracked ribs and all the rest, I remember getting this hand shoved in my face and pushing me off the step going, not enough room, because they were all Russian pilots that flew them. And so literally I got pushed up, the door was closed off, the helicopter taken off, and I was going,
your helicopter?
My helicopter. And sure, and I'm not, luckily enough, we knew there was still of our Argentina buddies that were still there. So we had to hang around for another couple of days before another helicopter could come in. Well, God, I forgot about that. That was absolutely hilarious. You know, like we were beggars for a couple of nights because we were just going around going, can anybody feed us? Can anybody put us up, please?
I think that was something was really powerful there. What you said, and it was both attempts you mentioned it is your desire to love, and especially coming from what you said previous in the show of when you were unwell when you were younger, of saying that you didn't want to love if this was going to be your life, and then that desire to love then when you were in the facing death pretty much is just powerful. And as you say, the human body, what it can do in the mind when you're faced with that. So I was extremely powerful. If you don't mind, Hannah, I have some, we'll call them quick fire questions, just
Okay. Yep.
based off some of the things that you might have covered some of them, but it's more that things I want to just know from someone who's climbed Everest. So this bit's not for anyone listening, it's just for me. But so we touched on getting there and who can do it, but just like if I decided tomorrow I want to do it, there's people like policing how experienced you are and like levels of climbing awards or what, or who decides that?
We've actually been battling and campaigning about this for a long time because I remember the first time that I went out, I was horrified seeing people obviously with money that or you know sort of, and they had people putting the crampons on. They had sort of, they were expecting people to mollycoddle them and to look after them. And certainly whenever I was training people to go to the North Pole and to climb and to go to any of the extremes, my philosophy was, I will train you up. As I always said, and I know it sounds really harsh, in my best Northern Irish accent, I used to scare the bejesus out of them because I went, I'm not here to wipe your backsides. I'm here to teach you skills
Yeah.
so that you can survive. Do not be looking at me to be looking after you. That's not what I'm here for. And I'm a very strong believer in that. If you go in these places, you have to be self-sufficient. You have to have the skill set. Because if you're depending on a guide, if something happens to them,
Yeah.
That's what happened in sort of the big, you're talking about Everest, that
Yeah.
movie. That's what happened then. There was a lot of very inexperienced people, did not have the experience at high altitude to get them out of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like it was a couple of years ago, was it that photo of like the amount of people queuing? Like
Yeah.
they branded it as that in the news. I don't know how true or whatever the truth of that is, but like queuing to get to the top of Everest, and has that been a problem of too many people just being allowed to go there at once and queue?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, that's one of the problems with that weather window. Believe you me, whenever you're sitting out in the Himalayas for a couple of months, you're losing weight, you don't want to eat. You're like, it's a harsh place to be. And it really is a harsh place to be. You want to get up and out as quickly as possible. So whenever there is that weather window, that's the problem that comes into it. So what they've started for a number of years, there's been a very strong campaign that you have to prove that you've been able to climb another 8,000-meter peak. You've done something else, because anybody, any Joe Blogs, if they had the money, they could have just gone out. And you get people who are inexperienced getting into trouble, causing a backlog behind them. And they don't have the expertise to get themselves out of it. And then other people are put, and that's where you get into the issues, that they just don't have the expertise to get out of any little trouble, or the experience to know. Like I had that first time, like I was ready to put my life in extreme danger and everybody else's. I was a liability, and I know that now. But at least I had clarity to kind of, and a bit of wisdom whenever it eventually did hit me in the face, only because Ger and Mick were behind me, and I knew I didn't want to put their lives at risk.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky that I got that clarity at that particular time.
Next question. What are you eating? What do you eat when you're on the go?
You do not, the problem with the high altitude, you lose your taste for food. So and you don't want it, you lose your appetite as well.
Mm-hmm.
So any food you get is all freeze dried. You're like high calories, and it's not even food. To me, it's just calories.
Yeah.
That's what you put in to keep the heater going. That's
Yeah.
the only way that I did it. Now, the first time, I remember Jared and Mick kept saying to me, Hannah, eat, eat, eat. And I was going, no, I just don't feel like it. Oh, no, I'm okay. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize by the time I was going for Summit, I had lost over a stone in weight.
Yeah.
So, of course, that was muscle mass, that was fat. So it was much more prone to the cold.
Mm-hmm.
The next time that I went out, I was much more disciplined. Even whenever I knew I didn't want to eat, I knew I had that, sort of discipline to just shove it into me,
Mm-hmm.
whether I liked it or not. I just went, you need this. You just have to put it into you. And you're eating through, I think I remember at that stage, we were eating about 20,000 calories a day
Oh.
and
And
still losing weight.
are they special? Are they bars? Are they solid food? Or are they gel? Or what does the form is it?
They literally, it was just freeze dried food with high calories in it, fat. Eggs, oh God, I never wanted to see another egg because you used to boil the eggs at base camp. And of course, because it's all frozen, like your average air temperature, during the day it got quite warm because the sun was belting down on you. But at night time, minus 25, minus 30, like you brought eggs and eating frozen eggs. Not the nicest thing in the world, but it was just calories. No, I couldn't do that the next time. I knew that I learned it's like if you're teaching somebody, whenever I was teaching people to go out to do any of the extreme stuff, I said, I can tell you what I eat, but what I ate took time and patience and me trial and error to see what suited me because every human being is different. So the first time we were taking a lot of gels, I hated them, hated them. The rest of the lads loved them. To be honest, they gave me bad diarrhea, couldn't cope with them. So, sort of every time I went out in the cold, particularly up in the polar region, I just kept trying different foods and different substitutes to see what suited me best.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I brought a lot of my own stuff out with me specifically that I knew that it was just that I could throw into me.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on earlier about clothing and like the expense of that. What is it that you're wearing in them temperatures? It's minus 25, minus 30. What do you have to wear to keep warm? And you're probably not warm, you're probably still cold, but
you always err on being slightly cool rather than warm.
Okay.
Because there's an old thing that we would always say, if you're out in the mountains or out in the polar regions, if you sweat, you die. Again, I know it sounds terribly dramatic, but if you're working too hard and you're sweating, that means your clothes are getting damp. You stop doing anything. We all know this whenever we're doing a training. You cool down very dramatically. The coldest I was out in was minus 89. Believe you me, that's painful. Whenever you can actually feel anything, it's painful.
Yeah.
At altitude, you've got these big onesie suits. You've got kick-ass gloves, as we call them. There's about 4 pairs of gloves that you have on your hands. You're still cold. You're always cold. You're never warm, but it's making sure that you can still function in that cold. Yeah, and it was trial and error. I invested in a lot of kit because I get cold quite quickly, and particularly after that first time that I got the frostbite in my hands and my feet, that did have a detrimental effect. Even still to this day, I'm always very conscious of my extremities, that they get cold very, very quickly.
And final question on this note: when you came back from Everest, did you feel like the adaptation to that altitude? Did you feel super fit or super strong afterwards, or just knackered? I mean, like in the week or so once you recovered a bit.
Yeah, do you know what? By the time I came back, like on the way, again, as a triathlete and as a racer, we all know that if you've done something, a particularly hard race, that you puked your guts up, you feel awful. You're sort of sitting there going, why do I do this? I will never do this again.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get home from that race, you've already got the next one organised.
Yeah.
By the time I came back from Everest, I knew what I was doing again.
And what was that?
Or I was going out to the polar regions again.
Very good. Very good. Hannah, I don't want to take up any more of your time. We've been on quite a bit, but it's amazing listening. But you also, it was a ski race, was it you done to the North Pole? Was that
Yeah, that was the
another?
first, that was after, yeah, after I came back in 2003, I got a phone call from a buddy, Richard Dunwoody. He's won the Grand National and things like that, and there was a jump jockey. He said, Hannah, do you fancy skiing to the North Pole? These are the kind of great mates I had. I went, absolutely. And so he couldn't do it, but there was another young doctor, Chris Van Tulken. I met him at the airport. We ended up going up to the Canadian Arctic to do that particular race to the magnetic North Pole. We all appreciate that. I'd never cross-country skied. I'd never pulled a pump behind me.
So it was
I'd never
cross-country
been.
skiing? It was
Yep.
the thin skis sort of thing?
No,
No.
these were specially adapted for sort of the polar regions. It's like you can do skiing, backcountry skiing, and they're much thicker. And they either, in olden days, they used to have skins in them, literally animal skins on them.
Yeah.
So you can walk up the side of the mountains and things like that.
Okay.
These are special skis. They've got little fish scales around the feet area so that you can get a grip for going up the side of mountains. So you literally are hauling the equivalent of probably about, I remember mine was about 140 kilos behind me. And the sea ice is not flat. It's all expanded, and you've got glaciers, sort of coming into this. You have got icebergs caught up in this. You've got rubble fields that could go on for days and days that you have to clamber over and pull all of this behind you. That was physically much, much tougher for me compared to the mountaineering, because I had to pull the same as the weight as all the lads. Now they had at least 3 or 4 stone minimum advantage over me.
Yeah.
I had to pull the same weight as them because I ate the same as them. I had the same kit as them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was physically very, very tough, but amazing. And we were in with military lads, and they were Marines, Arctic warfare specialists. And I remember, I think it was over the 24 days, there was only 5 of us finished, Chris, myself, and the 3 lads. And they beat us by an hour and a half. And now that still galls me. Oh, geez, that still galls me. And then they turned around to me and they sort of said, work with us. And, they were the Marines, the SAS lads, the Norwegian Special Forces. And as I always laughed and said to them, I'm a Northern Irish Catholic. And they laughed at me and went, yes, Hannah, we know. And so for quite a number of years, I worked with them, learned so much. And again, scared the bejesus out of me, because these were hardcore, like military lads, and particularly the Norwegian Special Forces. They took no prisoners. But I worked with them, I learned from them, then I trained up people, and it was an amazing experience. So for 6 months of the year, I worked with them, training like the likes of Top Gear, TV crews, all these people to go out onto the ice, and civilians, as we call them. And then for the other 6 months, I did locums in dentistry to get a bit of money together to keep paying the mortgage. And it was a great life.
Unbelievable.
It was a great life.
That sounds crazy. I must look that up, skiing the magnetic North Pole, just to get an idea of what it was. But Hannah, we appreciate you coming on, giving us your time. What's next for you? What's the next challenge have you anything in your sights once you fully recover?
I've got a few wee things, sort of, but again, I've not really put in any time scale because I'm still, God, I had lovely 31 Botox injections into the back of my head and neck and shoulders. After about 5, that was 4 big steroid injections. So like, it seems to be easing the migraines and the headaches down a bit. So I'm delighted about that. So typically, much to the annoyance of the doctors, I think they still keep saying to me, just go out and walk in the garden. And I sort of go, well, Benevena is my garden.
Your garden.
So Yeah.
Very good.
So their idea of what's normal and my idea of what's normal is slightly askew.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll continue to keep pushing myself. Sometimes I push myself too much. But I will never change. I don't make any apologies because that's who I am. I will always keep testing myself, and I have a couple of ideas what I would like to do.
Yeah.
And that's my goal. That's what's keeping me motivated. That's what makes me get out of my bed every day. Um, that I'll still do these things, but whenever I'll let people know about them whenever I know that
Yeah.
they're tangible.
Very good. Well, please God, your recovery continues and you get to do them things soon. Thanks a million again, Hannah, for coming on. It's been an inspirational listen and chatty, and just fascinated to listen to your stories on Everest and everything else. So, thanks very much again.
You're very welcome, Emmett, but it was a wee bit of a one-sided conversation, so
That's what
apologies
I
about
like.
that again.
That's what I like. I don't have to talk too much. Thanks a million, Hannah. So, show's over, everybody. Thanks for listening. What an episode that was with Hannah. Her experiences, her story about Everest was just unbelievable. I hope you got a lot of value from it and were inspired and motivated for your own performances or your own goals. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know what you thought. Please leave a review. Please leave a comment or share it with your friends or for anyone who might be interested. We'll be back next week with another guest. And thanks very much for listening. It means a lot that anyone who shares it, listens, sends me any messages and stuff. So thanks a million. And we'll be back next week. See ya.